Elena wakes up early, as she does every day, in the small abandoned house that, despite its state of degradation, she carefully maintains. The smell of wet earth and the soft sound of birds are part of the silence that surrounds her, a silence that she knows well since the accident that left her deaf. After feeding her pets, who are her main source of company, she puts on the simple and worn clothes she has, preparing herself for another long day of work. Elena lives alone, without family or close friends, except for her faithful animal companions. Although her life is marked by poverty and isolation, she maintains a resilient routine, taking care of herself and her home with dignity. As she closes the door to her house, the contrast between her little bubble of peace and the outside world begins to manifest itself. Upon arriving at the large manufacturing company where she works as a cleaner, Elena enters through the back, almost invisible to her colleagues. To them, she is nothing more than a shadow that walks through the hallways, cleaning and organizing the spaces they use. Clara, an arrogant and cruel employee, makes a sarcastic comment about Elena's modest appearance when she crosses her path. "Look, Cinderella has finally arrived. All that's missing is the fairy godmother," Clara mocks, causing laughter from the other employees. Elena remains impassive. She is already used to being the target of mean jokes, but that does not ease the weight that these words have on her. Even so, she continues with her routine, focused on her work. While Elena is cleaning the hallways of the main office, Ricardo, the company's new manager, appears to inspect. With his cold and arrogant gaze, he completely ignores Elena's presence, as if she were part of the furniture. However, when he notices Clara and the other employees mocking the young cleaner, he decides to intervene, but not in a gentle way. "You there, cleaner. You need to work faster. Time is money," he says with contempt, offering her a temporary contract with a paltry salary. He hands over the documents with a cynical smile, without even bothering to explain the details or look Elena in the eye. Elena signs the contract without hesitation. She needs the job, the little money it provides, and Ricardo knows it. To him, Elena is just another disposable tool to increase the company's profits. After signing the contract, Elena returns to her job, knowing that she has no other choice. She needs the salary to support her animals and maintain her small house. As she continues to clean the offices, she comes across a pile of papers on a desk. They are financial reports abandoned there without much care. Curious, she observes the numbers and graphs, her watchful eyes detecting errors and inconsistencies that the executives have not noticed. Nevertheless, she steps aside. Her job there is to clean, not to interfere in the company's business. However, the scene plants a seed. Elena has capabilities far beyond what she is allowed to demonstrate. At the end of the day, when the offices are empty and silence reigns, Elena works diligently, as always. Although she is invisible to everyone, there is something inside her that begins to awaken. A desire to do more, to be more than just a simple cleaner. Still, she stands her ground, accepting what she has been given, at least for now. The weight of the day's interactions is on her shoulders, but Elena does not let it show. She knows that her reality is harsh, but she also knows that she carries something special inside her, a talent that, at some point, perhaps can be revealed. As night falls, Elena returns to her home, where the animals welcome her with joy. There, far from the contempt and cruelty she faces at work, she finds some peace. After feeding her pets, she takes out an old business book that she keeps hidden and, in silence, begins to study. This is the moment when she can be who she really is, a curious and brilliant mind, thirsty for knowledge. As the city lights go out and the world sinks into sleep, Elena daydreams, imagining a future where her skills will be recognized. Even though the current reality denies her this opportunity, in the silence of her small home, she nurtures the hope that one day she will be seen for who she truly is. The morning at the manufacturing company begins with an emergency meeting called by Ricardo. He stands in front of all the employees with a look of contempt and an authoritarian posture. In a cutting tone, he announces severe changes in the work structure, significant salary cuts, and the imposition of long overtime without compensation. You must understand that the company is facing difficult times. If you don't cooperate, you're out, he says, his cold gaze sweeping the room. Murmurs of discontent run through the group, but no one dares to challenge him. Tensions grow, and the already oppressive environment becomes even more suffocating. The employees, who were already suffering from the overload, are now on the verge of burnout. Ricardo pretends that his actions are necessary to save the company, but in reality, his goal is only to maximize profits, without caring about the people around him. While everyone complains and discusses Ricardo's new impositions, Elena remains silent. She watches the chaos unfold around her, staying away from the discussions. She is aware that any dissatisfaction expressed out loud could result in dismissal, something she cannot allow herself to do. Elena continues with her work, cleaning the offices without attracting attention. Her presence remains invisible to most of her colleagues, but her resilience is admirable. Even under pressure and in the midst of a hostile environment, she maintains her focus and dedication. What no one knows is that, deep down, she has a growing desire to escape that reality. This silent strength is what keeps her going, and increasingly, the audience begins to see the contrast between her perseverance and Ricardo's moral weakness. During one of her evening cleaning routines, Elena finds a stack of abandoned financial reports on one of the executives' desks. Like last time, she can't resist the temptation and, on an almost involuntary impulse, begins to examine the documents. Her eyes scan the numbers with surprising ease, and she soon detects basic calculation errors and inconsistencies that any business professional would notice. Without thinking twice, Elena makes corrections on the paper in her careful handwriting. The precision of her notes is remarkable, and for a moment, she loses herself in her own skill, as if the world around her has disappeared. When she realizes what she has done, Elena recoils, her heart racing. Although she has made the reports more accurate, she fears being discovered. Even so, the satisfaction of having corrected the errors and the desire to do more are impossible to ignore. The next day, Ricardo, irritated by the recurring errors in the reports he receives, explodes in a fit of rage. He gathers the employees in his office, criticizing them fiercely. He doesn't care about the effort they put into their work. Only the results matter to him. "What are you doing? Isn't anyone here capable of doing a decent job?" he shouts, banging the table. His dark eyes roam each face, searching for someone to blame. The employees remain silent, oppressed by the fear of being fired. Elena, who is in a corner, watches the scene with a knot in her stomach. Ricardo's abusive behavior weighs on her, but she knows she must continue to work in silence to survive. After an exhausting and emotionally heavy day, Elena returns home at night, exhausted both physically and mentally. Ricardo's screams echo in her mind, while the weight of uncertainty hangs over her. But when she crosses the threshold of her house, her animals welcome her with affection, which brings her some relief. She sits in the armchair next to the fireplace and, amidst the silence that dominates her life, picks up one of her old management books. With the book open on her lap, Elena reflects on what happened that day, especially on the reports she corrected. Her desire to do something more, to be more than just a simple cleaning lady, grows even stronger. But she feels trapped in her condition. How could a deaf woman with no formal qualifications be taken seriously in an environment like that? Even with these doubts weighing on her mind, a new determination begins to emerge within her. As she flips through the pages of the book, Elena silently commits herself to continue her studies, to improve her skills in management and finance, even if the world around her does not recognize her. She does not yet know how or when she will be able to use this knowledge, but she is determined not to waste her talent. Although Ricardo's tyranny weighs on her shoulders, Elena begins to see a way out, even if distant, from the oppressive life she leads. The atmosphere at the company remains heavy. The employees work in silence, suffocated by Ricardo's tyranny, who seems blind to the growing chaos. In this scenario, Dr. Marco Vidal, the owner of the corporation, makes an unexpected visit to the office. His calm and serene face contrasts sharply with the tense atmosphere around him. He walks the corridors, observing the team attentively, his eyes capturing the oppressive energy of the place. Marco greets some employees with a polite smile, but soon realizes that something is wrong. The environment is much darker than he remembered, and the employees seem exhausted and dejected. He knew that Ricardo was implementing severe measures, but he had no idea that the impact would be so devastating. Determined to investigate further, Marco begins to ask the employees subtle questions, trying to understand what is happening behind the appearances. After some discreet conversations and observations, Marco suspects that something bigger is going on. He decides to take a silent but effective approach. Marco asks a trusted technician to install security cameras in strategic points of the office, especially in the most sensitive work areas, where he believes there may be hidden problems. "I want to know what happens here when Ricardo's eyes are not watching," he tells the technician, in a firm tone of voice, but without arousing suspicion. He knows that the solution to saving the company may lie in the hands of someone unexpected. Meanwhile, Ricardo continues to believe that he has everything under control. He sees Marco's presence as a simple formality, without realizing that his actions are being closely monitored. When night falls and the office empties, Elena begins her usual cleaning routine. She is meticulous and organized, moving with silent grace through the hallways. But unlike other nights, Elena is increasingly curious and involved in the reports left on the executives' desks. She finds another financial report, poorly organized and full of errors. This time, without hesitation, she picks up a pen and begins to correct the errors. Her skill with numbers is remarkable, and in a few minutes the document is impeccable. Elena loses herself in the pleasure of organizing the chaos, forgetting that, technically, this is not part of her responsibilities. The sound of silence is her only companion, and while the city sleeps, Elena reveals a talent that no one has ever recognized. In the following days, Marco begins to review the images captured by the security cameras. He patiently observes the recordings, looking for any sign of inappropriate behavior or anything that reveals what is eroding the company's morale. When he arrives at the nightly recordings, something surprises him. He sees Elena, the simple cleaning lady, reviewing and correcting financial reports with impressive precision. Marco is perplexed. He watches carefully several times to make sure he's not mistaken. The way Elena adjusts the numbers, rearranges the data, and takes clear notes reveals an intelligence that goes far beyond her duties. How come no one noticed this before? He asks himself, intrigued. It's clear to Marco that Elena has exceptional abilities, something that could completely change the fate of the company. Over the next few days, Marco decides to observe Elena more closely, without her noticing. He makes unexpected visits to the office and discreetly passes by the areas where Elena is working. Although she continues to perform her role as a cleaner impeccably, Marco notices how she behaves around the documents and reports. There's an aura of knowledge in her eyes that he can't ignore. Over time, Marco confirms his suspicions. Elena has a rare talent, and he knows that somehow he needs to bring this gift to the surface, but without scaring her or exposing her before the right time. He wants to know more about her story, and how she developed these skills. Elena continues her daily routine unaware that Marco is watching her. She feels more confident in her actions, reviewing reports whenever she has the chance, as if she were secretly contributing to the company's success. For her, this is a way to connect with the business world she admires so much, even if no one knows. However, this confidence that Elena is building is a kind of prelude to something bigger. She has no idea that her future is about to change drastically, and that her silent nights of study and extra work are being carefully monitored. Clara, always observant and critical, begins to notice changes in Ricardo's behavior. He seems more irritable and insecure than usual, especially when dealing with the company's financial reports. Something doesn't seem right, and Clara, despite her usual indifference towards others, can't ignore this feeling that there is something strange going on behind the scenes. During a coffee break, Clara sees one of the reports that Ricardo left on the table and, curious, decides to take a look. To her surprise, the report is very well done, detailed and precise, something she wouldn't associate with Ricardo's work, who has always been known for his lack of attention to detail. Intrigued, Clara begins to pay more attention, trying to figure out who could have helped Ricardo produce such an impeccable report. One evening, as she's getting ready to leave, Clara decides to stop by the administrative area later than usual. As she walks through the quiet hallways, she sees a light on in one of the rooms and hears the faint sound of papers being shuffled. Quietly approaching, she peeks through the crack in the door and sees something that shocks her. Elena, the cleaning lady, is sitting at one of the executive's desk, reviewing and correcting a financial report. At first, Clara can't believe what she's seeing. How could a cleaning lady, who is barely noticed by others, have this level of knowledge and skill? She stands there for a moment, processing what she's just witnessed, before walking away, determined to confront Elena the next day. The next day, Clara wastes no time. She waits for Elena at the end of the day, when most of the employees have already left. When she finally sees her alone, Clara approaches her directly. "Elena, what were you doing last night in the offices?" Clara asks, her voice hard but curious. Elena, taken aback, feels her heart race. She tries to pretend she doesn't understand the question, but she knows Clara has already figured something out. "I was just finishing my cleaning job," Elena replies, her voice low and hesitant. Clara, however, is not fooled. "I saw you correcting a report. How do you know how to do that? There's no way a cleaning lady has that kind of knowledge." Elena hesitates, but finally, with a sigh, she reveals part of her story to Clara. She tells about how she lost her hearing, how she studied business on her own, and how her love of numbers and organization led her to correct reports, even though no one knew about her skills. Clara is silent for a moment after hearing Elena's story. She has always been competitive and ambitious, and the success of others often irritated her. But something about Elena's humility and sincerity resonates with her. For the first time, Clara sees Elena not as a cleaning lady, but as an intelligent woman, capable of much more than people imagine. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone about this?" Clara asks, her voice softer now.
Elena shrugs.
"Who would believe me? I'm just the cleaning lady. And besides, I'm deaf. People already look at me differently because of that." Clara feels a pang of empathy for the first time. She had always despised Elena for her plain appearance, but now she realizes that there is much more to this woman than she ever imagined. "You should tell Dr. Vidal," Clara says, suggesting a solution that would never have occurred to her before. "He needs to know what you are capable of." Elena hesitates again. The idea of putting herself out there and risking rejection or ridicule terrifies her. "I don't know. What if he doesn't believe me? What if it hurts me?" In the days that follow, Clara begins to treat Elena differently. Her contempt has been replaced by a cautious respect. Although Clara still maintains a firm and reserved demeanor, she begins to seek opportunities to talk to Elena, offering her support and, on some occasions, even asking for advice on small problems at work. The friendship between the two begins to grow slowly and unexpectedly. Clara, who has always been a cold and calculating woman, begins to see Elena as a kind of potential ally. Although she is still competitive, her view of Elena has changed. For Clara, there is now an intelligent and skilled woman where before she only saw an insignificant figure. Elena, on the other hand, begins to trust Clara little by little. She still carries a certain distrust, since she knows that Clara has a reputation for being ambitious and, often, cruel. But Clara's unexpected support and the possibility that someone will finally recognize her abilities begin to soften the barriers she had built over the years. Meanwhile, the atmosphere at the company continues to deteriorate under Ricardo's oppressive leadership. He continues to pressure employees, demanding more results with fewer resources, while desperately trying to maintain his image as a competent manager. However, the mistakes continue to pile up, and the tension reaches a breaking point. Elena, now more aware of the chaos unfolding around her, watches with growing concern. She knows she could help, but the fear of exposing herself still prevents her from taking action. Clara, sensing Elena's hesitation, tries to encourage her. "Elena, you can't just stand by and watch this happen. You have the skills to help. If Ricardo continues to control, the company will go under." Elena knows Clara is right, but she still hesitates. The voice of her own insecurity is too loud to ignore. Tired of Elena's indecisiveness, Clara decides to take the initiative. One day, she approaches Elena with a bold proposal. I know you're scared, but what you've done so far already shows what you're capable of. If you don't want to expose yourself completely, how about showing what you can do in a subtle way? Elena looks at Clara, confused. What do you mean? Clara explains her plan. We can adjust the reports together and let Dr. Vidal notice on his own. It doesn't have to be something direct, but if you keep doing what you're doing, eventually he'll notice. You don't have to be invisible forever. Elena considers the idea. She knows she can't keep hiding her abilities forever, and Clara's suggestion seems like a less risky path. With her colleagues' support, she feels that it might be possible to take a step forward without completely exposing her vulnerabilities. With Clara's plan in mind, Elena begins to review the company's most important reports, always in a subtle way, correcting errors and improving details. She does this during her cleaning hours without drawing attention to herself, but with the moral support of Clara, who discreetly monitors the process. In the days that follow, the corrected reports begin to circulate among the executives. Dr. Vidal, who had already been keeping an eye on the company because of his suspicions about Ricardo, begins to notice a significant improvement in the quality of the documents. He realizes that something has changed, but he still cannot identify exactly who is behind it. Weeks pass and the effects of Ricardo's mismanagement begin to show more clearly. Financial reports show a sharp drop in the company's profits. Dr. Marco Vidal, aware that something is very wrong, becomes increasingly concerned. He observes that the company's performance is deteriorating under Ricardo's leadership, and the internal climate among employees is increasingly tense and unproductive. Dr. Vidal calls an emergency meeting with Ricardo to discuss the alarming numbers. At the meeting, Ricardo tries to downplay the situation, blaming the economy and the lack of commitment of the employees. They are not producing as they should, Dr. Vidal. We are in a difficult time, but with some strategic changes, we will be able to turn the situation around, Ricardo says with false confidence. However, Dr. Vidal is not convinced. He senses that there is something deeper at play. Ricardo, I need to see a concrete recovery plan. We can't go on like this. If there isn't significant improvement soon, we'll have to make drastic changes. Ricardo, feeling the weight of the threat, promises to come up with a solution within a few days. Even though he knows he's in a delicate position, he desperately needs a plan to save himself. Ricardo, desperate to maintain his position, decides to take a risky path. He begins to observe the younger, inexperienced employees who still have fresh ideas and innovative strategies, but lack the power or influence to implement them. Ricardo takes advantage of this situation. He steals the ideas he hears in smaller meetings and presents them as his own, without giving credit to anyone. He collects reports and strategy outlines from various departments and combines them into a plan that, on the surface, seems robust. However, he lacks the deep understanding of the details and risks of these ideas, which makes the plan inconsistent and fragile. Meanwhile, Clara and Elena realize what Ricardo is doing. Clara, now Elena's ally, is furious. He's stealing ideas from employees, and the worst part is that if he manages to implement these strategies incorrectly, it will be a disaster for the company, says Clara in an indignant tone. Elena, on the other hand, feels torn. She knows she has the skills to prevent the disaster, but the fear of exposing herself still prevents her from taking direct action. Clara tries to encourage her again. Elena, if you don't do anything, he'll destroy everything. We've seen it happen. We need to act. Determined not to let Ricardo continue with his maneuvers, Clara decides to confront him. She finds him in his office and bluntly accuses him of stealing ideas from employees. Ricardo, I know what you're doing. You're taking other people's work and presenting it as if it were your own. This won't save the company, and if you continue, things will get worse. Ricardo, surprised by Clara's audacity, tries to defend himself, but his frustration is evident. You don't understand what's at stake here, Clara. If the company goes down, we all go down. Someone has to step up and do something, and if I have to take these ideas to make sure we have a chance, then so be it. Clara senses that Ricardo is afraid, but his pride keeps him from admitting his failures. She leaves the office, even more determined to help Elena take action before it's too late. As Clara confronts Ricardo, Elena goes through her own personal dilemma. During her lonely nights at home, she remembers the sacrifices she made and how she got here. Her love of numbers and organization has always kept her going through adversity, but the fear of being rejected or humiliated paralyzes her. Insecurity about her deafness and her position in the company still weighs heavily on her shoulders. Clara visits her at home that night, determined to convince her that it's time to take action. Elena, you've already done more than anyone here could. You've corrected the reports, saved the company from so many mistakes. Why not take the next step?
Elena hesitates.
What if they don't believe me? What if Ricardo blames me for something? Clara puts her hand on Elena's shoulder, offering her a rare gesture of support. I'll be there for you, but you have to believe in yourself. Dr. Vidal is no fool. He's already realized that there's something going on behind the scenes. If you show him what you can do, he'll understand. Elena knows Clara is right, but taking this step still seems scary. However, something inside her is starting to change. She feels that maybe it's time to face her fears and show the world who she really is. Meanwhile, Ricardo is busy preparing a big presentation for Dr. Vidal and the executives. He plans to present the strategic plan he stole from the employees, believing that it will be enough to impress the board and ensure his continued employment with the company. However, Ricardo is nervous. He knows that if something goes wrong during the presentation, his career could be at risk. He spends hours reviewing the documents, trying to understand the details that he himself did not create, but his lack of mastery over the content makes him insecure. Elena and Clara watch from afar, aware that the fate of the company is in the hands of someone who is incapable of guiding it. The night before the big presentation, Clara and Elena meet once again. Clara, ever practical, proposes a simple plan. We'll do what we do best. You'll review and correct Ricardo's plan, just as you've done before. Let's make it as robust as possible so that if he tries to take credit, Dr. Vidal will realize that he is not the real author.
Elena agrees.
She knows she needs to act, but she prefers to do so discreetly, without exposing herself completely. That night, she reviews Ricardo's plan, adjusting details, correcting errors, and adding suggestions that, if applied correctly, could actually help the company recover. Clara, in turn, ensures that the revised documents are delivered to the conference room the next day. She knows that this is the only chance to make Dr. Vidal realize who is really working to save the company. The next day, the big meeting with Dr. Vidal and the top executives begins. Ricardo enters the room with forced confidence, carrying the reports that Elena quietly adjusted the night before. He presents his strategic plan with a series of graphs and projections that, to the less attentive executives, seem impressive. Dr. Vidal listens patiently, but there is something about the documents that intrigues him. He knows that Ricardo is not capable of producing such a detailed and well-structured plan. The careful writing, clear graphs, and accuracy of the data are much better than Ricardo's usual work. When Ricardo finishes the presentation, Dr. Vidal pauses for a long time, his gaze shifting from the papers to Ricardo. This is a good plan, Ricardo, but there is something that doesn't add up. The style here doesn't seem like yours. Ricardo, disconcerted, tries to maintain his composure, but his confidence begins to waver. The tension in the room rises, and Ricardo realizes that he is about to be unmasked. He tries to justify the plan, explaining that he sought inspiration from various sources within the company. However, Dr. Vidal is not convinced. He already has his suspicions about who is really behind this meticulous work. The meeting ends with a sense of unease, and Dr. Vidal decides he needs to investigate further into what is happening. He knows that Ricardo is not the mastermind behind the plan, but he does not yet have all the pieces of the puzzle. After the meeting, Dr. Marco Vidal senses that something is very wrong. The plan presented by Ricardo is too detailed to be the work of someone as negligent as he is. The numbers, the solutions, everything seems to have come from a much more organized and meticulous mind. Marco knows he needs to investigate further, and decides to confront Ricardo more directly. The next day, he calls Ricardo for a private meeting in his office. "Ricardo, I need to better understand this plan you presented. Who exactly worked with you on the preparation of these reports?" Ricardo, nervous but trying to maintain confidence, responds, "I had some suggestions from other employees, but I was the one who coordinated everything." Dr. Vidal remains silent for a moment, analyzing every word. He is not convinced but does not confront Ricardo immediately. Instead, he decides to take a more strategic approach. He knows that Ricardo is not telling the truth, but he also understands that he needs evidence to completely unmask him. Determined to discover the true origin of the plan, Dr. Vidal reviews the security cameras that were installed weeks before. He goes back to watching the nighttime footage, as he had done before, and once again comes across something that impresses him. Elena, the cleaning lady, correcting reports with the same precision as before, taking detailed notes and adjusting numbers. Dr. Vidal watches the recordings several times, in disbelief. How is it possible that someone like her, who was barely noticed by others, is capable of doing such high-level work? Doubt turns into certainty. Elena is the true author of the corrections and improvements that made the plan so effective. Determined to confront Ricardo, he knows that he cannot do so without first speaking to Elena. He wants to hear the story directly from her, to understand how she got to that point and what motivated her to correct the reports. He feels that Elena is the key to saving the company. Dr. Vidal arranges a discreet meeting with Elena, requesting her presence at the headquarters after work. When she arrives, she is nervous. Clara, who has heard about the summons, encourages her to be honest. "He already knows part of the truth, Elena. Now is the time to tell him everything." As Elena enters Dr. Vidal's office, she is anxious but determined. Dr. Vidal greets her with a friendly look, unlike any other superior she has ever dealt with. He begins the conversation gently, without accusing her of anything. "I watched the security footage, Elena. I saw you correcting the reports. I need to understand what is happening and how you acquired these extraordinary abilities. Can you tell me your story?" Elena, her heart racing, takes a deep breath and begins to speak. She tells everything. How she lost her parents and her hearing in the accident. How she found comfort and refuge in numbers and management, studying alone during the nights at home. She explains how she felt invisible in the company, but at the same time she wanted to help, even if secretly, by correcting the mistakes she found. Dr. Vidal listens to every word carefully, surprised and impressed by Elena's resilience and intelligence. He realizes that she is a unique person, with a capacity that goes far beyond what her current role would suggest. "You have a rare talent, Elena. I can't believe no one has noticed it before," he says, with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. With the truth finally out in the open, Dr. Vidal knows he can no longer put off confronting Ricardo. He calls an emergency meeting with all of the company's top executives, including Ricardo, Clara, and Elena. Once everyone is gathered, Dr. Vidal begins to speak, his voice calm but firm. "Something very serious needs to be discussed today. I recently received a strategic plan from Ricardo, which at first glance seemed excellent. However, something was not right. I knew Ricardo did not have the skills to develop such a detailed plan, so I began to investigate." He pauses, letting the suspense build in the room. Ricardo begins to sweat, his gaze restless, while Clara and Elena watch silently. "After reviewing the security footage and speaking with a few people, I have discovered that this plan was not made by Ricardo. The true author of the corrections and improvements is someone else, someone who has long been neglected by this company." The silence in the room is absolute. Dr. Vidal turns to Ricardo and confronts him directly. "Ricardo, you took credit for someone else's work. You appropriated the ideas and talent of Elena, whom many here saw as nothing more than a cleaning lady. This is unforgivable." Ricardo, pale and speechless, tries to defend himself. I just wanted to help the company. Elena was making corrections, but I thought it would be better to present the plan as my own to make things easier." Dr. Vidal shakes his head in disappointment. "That's the difference between leadership and selfishness," Ricardo. You had the chance to recognize someone's talent and chose to appropriate it. There's no room for that in my company. Without further excuses, Ricardo is fired in front of everyone. His reputation, previously built on the image of a competent manager, crumbles in a matter of minutes. The other executives look on in surprise and, in some cases, relief. Clara, who witnessed the confrontation, feels a quiet satisfaction as she watches Ricardo's empire crumble. As Ricardo leaves the office in disgrace, Dr. Vidal turns his attention to Elena. Elena, your intelligence and dedication saved this company from disaster. Now I want you to take on a new role. You've already shown that you're capable of so much more, and it's time for everyone to recognize that. Elena, still in disbelief, feels tears welling up in her eyes. Everything she had always dreamed of, but never dared to believe was possible, was happening in that moment. For the first time, she felt seen and valued. After the meeting, Dr. Vidal offers Elena an official position in the company, as a project manager. You will lead the implementation of your own ideas. I know it may be scary at first, but Clara and I will be by your side. Elena hesitates for a moment. The insecurity about her deafness and how others perceive her still plagues her. I don't know if I'm ready. What if people don't accept me? Dr. Vidal smiles understandingly. You've already proven that you're more than capable. It's not about being ready, it's about believing in yourself. And you won't be alone. Clara already recognizes your worth, and I'm sure that soon everyone here will see the same. Clara, who was standing next to her, gives a slight nod, reinforcing her support. You've made it this far on your own, Elena. Now we're with you. That night, back at home, Elena reflects on everything that has happened. She remembers the lonely nights of studying, the hard work, the invisibility. Now everything was changing. She would have a real chance to show the world what she was capable of doing. After much reflection, she finally makes her decision. The next day, she walks into Dr. Vidal's office with a new determination in her eyes. I accept the position. I am ready to take on this challenge. Dr. Vidal smiles proudly. You will do an excellent job, Elena. I am sure of it. With Ricardo's downfall and Elena's rise, the company enters a new phase. Elena begins to gradually take on responsibilities, implementing her own ideas and leading with humility and competence. Little by little, the employees who previously saw her as an insignificant figure begin to realize her true value. Elena not only transforms the company, but also inspires those around her. Her story of overcoming adversity, intelligence and courage becomes an example of how true strength does not come from the position one holds, but from the mind and heart. The day dawns, bringing a new phase for Elena. For the first time, she doesn't enter the company through the back, as she did when she was a cleaner. She walks the halls now as the new project manager, a position she never imagined she would hold. Her posture is still shy, but her heart is determined. As she walks through the halls, some employees watch her curiously. Many of them are still processing the former cleaner's sudden rise to a prestigious position. Others, especially those who have seen Elena's hidden talent, feel proud and hopeful that the changes she will bring will be positive. Elena arrives at her new office, simple but functional. As she sits at her desk, she looks around, absorbing the change in her life. Still nervous, but aware that her ideas can make a difference, she begins to organize the projects that need her attention. The first challenge lies ahead of her, and she knows she must prove to herself and others that she is capable of transforming the company. First thing in the morning, Elena receives her first big challenge. Dr. Vidal asks her to reorganize a critical project that was on the verge of failure. It is an important partnership that, if successful, could bring great profitability to the company. However, the project was in disarray under Ricardo's leadership, and now it is up to Elena to save what is left. She carefully studies all the reports and documents, identifying the errors and flaws in the previous execution. Her attention to detail and her ability to organize complex information are immediately put to the test. Dr. Vidal watches her from afar, curious to see how Elena will do in the face of such an important task. Although she was promoted based on her talent, Now, in practice, it is time to show tangible results. Elena knows she will need her team's support to save the project. With that in mind, she organizes a meeting with key stakeholders. It's the first time she's presented herself as a leader in front of the other employees, and the tension is palpable. As Elena enters the conference room, she feels everyone's eyes on her. There's a mix of skepticism and curiosity among the attendees. Some of the older employees who worked under Ricardo are still unconvinced that Elena, the former janitor, can lead successfully. Elena begins the meeting with a slight tremor in her voice, but she quickly finds her groove. She explains her analysis of the project and then presents an action plan to correct the mistakes. Her approach is practical and detailed, and she makes a point of listening to the team members' concerns and suggestions. As the meeting progresses, the initial skepticism begins to fade. The employees realize that Elena has a deep understanding of the numbers and the strategies needed to turn the project around. Little by little, the team's confidence in her grows, and by the end of the meeting, many are convinced that Elena can, in fact, be an effective leader. At the end of the day, Elena meets with Clara in her office. Clara, who has been her biggest supporter throughout her ascension process, is excited about Elena's progress. "You were amazing today. I saw how you earned their trust," Clara says with a smile of satisfaction. Elena, although relieved, is still a little unsure. "I don't know. I still feel like some are waiting for me to fail." Clara shakes her head, determined to support Elena. "There will always be doubters, but you've already proven that you're more than ready. The most important thing is that you stay true to your ideas and keep working hard. They'll see." Clara's words comfort Elena, who feels strengthened by her friend's support. Clara, once a fierce rival, is now an essential ally on her journey. Elena knows she will have to continue overcoming challenges, but with Clara by her side and Dr. Vidal supporting her decisions, she feels she is on the right path. After a few weeks of intense work, the changes implemented by Elena are beginning to bear fruit. She has reorganized the team, delegated responsibilities more effectively, and eliminated the bottlenecks that were slowing down progress. The project, which was previously on the brink of failure, is now beginning to regain its rhythm, and the first positive results are appearing. Dr. Vidal, who has been closely following the development, calls Elena to congratulate her. "You have achieved something that many did not believe was possible. You are leading with intelligence and determination. I am sure there is much more to come." Elena smiles, grateful for the recognition. "I am simply doing what I believe is best for the company. I know there is still much room for improvement, but I am determined to continue." Dr. Vidal approaches, his expression now more personal. "Elena, from the beginning, I saw something special in you. It was not only your ability with numbers, but your vision for the future and your tireless dedication. You have an important place here, and I want you to know that I trust your decisions completely." These words have a profound impact on Elena. For the first time, she feels like she has found her place in the world, not just as an employee, but as someone with a vision and a voice that matters. Over time, Elena and Dr. Vidal begin to grow closer. Although their relationship began professionally, the two share a connection based on mutual respect and similar visions for the future of the company. They begin to spend more time together, discussing not only work, but also ideas about leadership, management, and even their personal lives. During a business dinner, Dr. Vidal reveals a little more about his story. He tells how he also came from humble beginnings and how he had to fight hard to build the company he now runs. Elena listens attentively, realizing that they share more in common than she realized. These conversations strengthen the bond between the two. Elena begins to see Dr. Vidal not just as a boss, but as a mentor and perhaps more. She feels that he understands her in a way that few others ever have. With the project under her command going from strength to strength, Elena begins to earn the respect and admiration of her entire team. Employees who once viewed her with skepticism now recognize her competence. Her leadership is marked by empathy and the ability to listen to others, which creates a more collaborative and productive environment. Gradually, Elena realizes that her voice has power, and her decisions are directly impacting the success of the company. She is no longer the woman who feared being invisible. She is now a recognized leader, and this fills her with a sense of purpose and fulfillment. As the months pass, the company begins to thrive under Elena's leadership and the changes she has implemented. Dr. Vidal, Clara, and the entire team now see her as a key player in the future of the organization. Dr. Vidal, in particular, is impressed by Elena's growth, and his feelings for her begin to deepen. He sees in her not only a competent leader, but a person of integrity with whom he feels a genuine connection. Although they have not yet discussed it openly, they both sense that something more is blossoming between them. Elena, for her part, is more confident than ever. She knows there is still much work to be done, but for the first time in her life, she no longer feels invisible. On the contrary, she feels seen, respected, and ready to continue her journey, not only as a leader, but as someone who has transformed her own life through her strength and intelligence. The results of the changes Elena implemented are impressive. The company, which was on the verge of collapse, is now beginning to thrive again. The employees, who were previously unmotivated, have faith in the company and the new leadership. Sales increase, customers return, and confidence in the future of the corporation is restored. Dr. Vidal organizes a general meeting to formally recognize Elena's work. In front of the entire team, he gives a moving speech. When I met Elena, I could never have imagined the impact she would have on our company. She came from a place where many of us would never even look, and she showed that true talent and true leadership do not depend on titles, but on who you are and what you are capable of doing. Elena listens, moved, as applause fills the room. For the first time in her life, she does not feel invisible. Now, she is in the spotlight, being recognized not only for her work, but for her journey of overcoming obstacles. After the event, Dr. Vidal asks to speak with Elena in his office. He greets her with a warm smile and a twinkle of admiration in his eyes. You have been an inspiration to all of us, Elena. I thought of something that could express my gratitude for what you have done, not only for the company, but also for me. He reveals a document, and Elena, curious, examines it. It is the deed to a piece of land outside the city with a large green space. Dr. Vidal smiles at the confusion on Elena's face. This is the land where we will build an animal shelter, in your name. I know how much your pets mean to you, and how they have been a source of comfort in your life. I want this shelter to be a place where you can care for more abandoned animals, just as you have cared for all of us. Elena is speechless. Tears begin to well up in her eyes as she looks at Dr. Vidal, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. I don't know what to say. It's more than I could ever imagine. Dr. Vidal approaches and places his hand on her shoulder. You deserve this, Elena, and so much more. As the months pass, the relationship between Dr. Vidal and Elena deepens. The respect and admiration they once had for each other turns into a stronger personal connection. They begin to spend more time together outside of work, sharing conversations about their visions for life, their dreams, and their challenges. One of these evenings, as they walk the grounds of the future shelter, Dr. Vidal opens up about how he too has had a journey of overcoming obstacles. He reveals the difficulties he faced when starting the company, without many resources, and how he fought to get where he is. For Elena, it is a revealing moment. She realizes that, like her, Dr. Vidal built his success based on perseverance and effort. That's why I believe in you so much, Elena. You remind me of my own struggle, and I see in you the same strength I had to overcome obstacles, he says, as he looks at her with a deep gaze. Elena smiles, feeling even closer to Dr. Vidal. The bond they share is something rare, and she knows she is developing feelings that go beyond simple admiration. Shortly thereafter, Elena discovers something that will change her life forever. She is pregnant with Dr. Vidal's child. The news fills her with unexpected joy, but also with a certain fear. She, who spent her life being seen as the invisible cleaner, is now going to be a mother, and everything in her life is about to change again. She shares the news with Dr. Vidal, who receives it with great happiness. This is incredible, Elena. We are going to start a new life together. I have never felt as excited about the future as I do now. Elena, although excited, also feels the responsibility that lies ahead. But for the first time in her life, she is not afraid of the unknown. With Dr. Vidal by her side, she feels she can face any challenge. As preparations for the baby and the shelter progress, Elena receives another surprising piece of news. She is informed about a new experimental surgery that may partially restore her hearing. The idea of hearing again, after so many years, makes her anxious and insecure. She has always lived in silence and, in a way, has learned to find peace in that silence. Dr. Vidal supports her decision to have the surgery, but makes it clear that, regardless of the outcome, she will continue to be the incredible person he admires. It doesn't matter if you hear or not, Elena. You are perfect exactly as you are. With this support, Elena decides to undergo the surgery. The process is delicate, and the following weeks are filled with anticipation. After the surgery, the doctors inform Elena that her hearing has been partially restored. She can hear sounds for the first time since the accident that took the lives of her parents. The sound of the wind, the voices of the people around her. Everything seems new and yet familiar. Elena is moved to hear Dr. Vidal's laughter for the first time and the barking of her dogs, who have always been her silent companions. It is a moment of reconnection with the world she has lost, and the experience is profoundly transformative. Although her hearing is not perfect, enough has been restored that she can communicate more easily and feel more connected to the world around her. For Elena, this is yet another symbol of her journey of overcoming, of how she has faced all the challenges that life has presented her with and overcome them. A few months later, the animal shelter, which now bears Elena's name, is finally inaugurated. The space is spacious, surrounded by greenery, and full of life. Dogs, cats, and other abandoned animals find temporary homes until they are adopted, and Elena feels a deep satisfaction in seeing the project come to fruition. On the day of the opening, Dr. Vidal gives an emotional speech, emphasizing how the shelter represents more than just a place for animals. This shelter is a symbol of Elena's generosity and strength. Just as she cared for us, now she cares for these animals with the same dedication and love. Elena, next to Dr. Vidal, feels at peace. She knows that she has finally found her place in the world, a place where she can make a difference. With the shelter up and running, the business thriving, and a child on the way, Elena and Dr. Vidal begin to build a new life together. They marry in a simple ceremony, surrounded by friends and co-workers, many of whom, at first, would never have imagined that Elena, the invisible young woman, would make it this far. In that moment, in front of everyone who always doubted her, Elena realizes how transformative her journey has been. She has overcome obstacles, broken prejudices, and, above all, believed in herself when no one else did. Now, with Dr. Vidal by her side, she looks to the future with hope. They are expecting their first child together, and Elena knows that this new phase of her life will be full of challenges, but also joy. As she holds Dr. Vidal's hand, she smiles, knowing that her journey is far from over. She has found her purpose, her voice, and most importantly, she has found the love and recognition she always deserved. The future, for her, is a vast field of possibilities, and she is ready to face it with courage and determination. To watch the next story, subscribe to the channel and see you next time.